Billionaire Marcus Chun sat in first-class seat 1A of the cross-country flight, his face flushed with exhaustion and humiliation as his 7-month-old son Tyler screamed at the top of his lungs. For 4 straight hours, every passenger on the plane had endured the relentless crying that no amount of money, power, or desperation seemed able to stop. Before we continue, subscribe, like, and please comment on which country you're watching from. Marcus had tried everything. He'd paced the aisles bouncing Tyler, offered multiple bottles, changed diapers frantically, and even played white noise through his $400 noise-canceling headphones pressed against his son's tiny ears. Nothing worked. The other first-class passengers were shooting him increasingly murderous looks. Flight attendants had exhausted their repertoire of suggestions. Even the captain had made a pointed announcement about ensuring passenger comfort, which Marcus knew was aimed directly at him. That's when something impossible happened. A 17-year-old Latina girl from the economy section walked up to Marcus's seat, her clothing worn but meticulously clean, her backpack held together with safety pins and colorful patches. Without asking permission or introducing herself, the teenager gently reached toward the screaming baby. "May I?" she asked softly, her young voice somehow cutting through Tyler's wails. Marcus was so exhausted and desperate that he didn't even question why a stranger, let alone a teenager, was offering to help. He simply nodded, too tired to care about protocol, propriety, or the hostile stares from surrounding passengers who clearly thought this was inappropriate. The moment the girl's hands touched Tyler, something miraculous happened. The screaming stopped. Complete, absolute silence fell over the entire airplane cabin as 250 passengers held their breath, waiting to see if this impossible quiet would last. The teenager was holding Tyler with a confidence that seemed impossible for someone her age, gently applying pressure to specific points on his back while humming a soft melody that Marcus had never heard before. Tyler's eyes, which had been squeezed shut in distress for hours, slowly opened and focused on the girl's face. For the first time since takeoff, he looked calm, peaceful, almost content. "How did you?" Marcus whispered, staring at this mysterious teenager who had accomplished what pediatric specialists and professional nannies couldn't achieve. The girl smiled gently. "My twin brothers were both colicky. Took me almost a year to figure out what actually worked." Marcus looked around the cabin and saw something that made his heart race with disbelief. Every single passenger was staring at them, not with annoyance anymore, but with amazement and profound relief. But what shocked Marcus most was what he noticed about this young woman who had just performed a miracle with his son. The girl's backpack was covered with science competition patches from institutions Marcus recognized: NASA, MIT, Caltech. Her battered notebook, visible through the open zipper, was filled with complex chemical formulas and molecular diagrams. And there was an intelligence in her eyes that seemed far beyond her years. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with wonder and curiosity. The teenager looked Marcus directly in the eyes with a maturity that was startling. "My name is Isabella Rodriguez. I'm 17 years old. I'm from East Los Angeles, and I'm on my way to Boston to compete in the National Chemistry Olympics." Marcus felt his world tilt as he realized that the person who had just saved his sanity and his son's comfort wasn't some trained professional or wealthy peer. She was a brilliant teenager from one of the most challenging neighborhoods in America, traveling alone to pursue her dreams. But as Isabella continued to hold Tyler, who was now cooing contentedly in her arms, Marcus had no idea that this chance encounter was about to reveal a story of determination, sacrifice, and genius that would change both their lives forever. And neither of them knew that what happened next would challenge everything Marcus thought he knew about intelligence, opportunity, and what it truly means to recognize potential when you see it. Marcus Chun was the 38-year-old founder and CEO of Biogenesis Labs, a pharmaceutical company worth over $6 billion that specialized in revolutionary cancer treatments and genetic therapies. He was traveling to Boston for a critical FDA approval hearing that could determine whether his company's breakthrough leukemia treatment would reach patients nationwide. Normally, Marcus traveled alone, working on presentations during flights and conducting conference calls from 30,000 feet. But this trip was different because his husband David was presenting at a medical conference in Tokyo and couldn't care for their 7-month-old adopted son, Tyler. "I can postpone the Boston hearing," Marcus had told David during their video call. "Absolutely not," David replied firmly from his hotel room in Tokyo. "This FDA approval has taken 3 years. Take Tyler with you. How hard can it be to manage a baby for a 4-day trip?" Marcus had hired the most exclusive childcare agency in San Francisco to find someone who could travel with them, but the nanny had quit 24 hours before departure, citing a family emergency that Marcus suspected was actually fear of handling a high-needs infant. With no time to find a replacement and a hearing that couldn't be rescheduled, Marcus found himself boarding a plane to Boston with a 7-month-old baby, minimal childcare experience, and a packed schedule of meetings that would determine his company's future. For the first 90 minutes of the flight, Tyler had been perfect. He'd slept peacefully in his first-class bassinet, while Marcus reviewed clinical trial data and FDA submission documents. Marcus began to think that David had been right. How hard could it be? Then Tyler woke up screaming, and Marcus's confidence evaporated completely. He tried the bottle that David had carefully prepared. Tyler rejected it violently, arching his back and screaming louder. He tried changing Tyler's diaper in the cramped airplane bathroom, a claustrophobic nightmare that left him sweating and flustered. Tyler continued screaming. He tried walking the aisles, bouncing Tyler gently the way he'd seen David do it. Tyler's cries only intensified, reaching decibel levels that seemed impossible for such a small human. The flight attendants offered suggestions with professional smiles that couldn't hide their growing concern about the disruption to other passengers. "Sometimes babies just need to cry it out," one attendant suggested diplomatically. "Have you tried skin-to-skin contact?" another offered, which sounded reasonable until Marcus realized he'd have to remove his shirt in the first-class cabin. Nothing worked. Tyler screamed with an intensity that suggested physical pain or deep distress that Marcus couldn't identify or address. As the hours dragged on, Marcus became increasingly aware of the hostile atmosphere developing around him in the first-class cabin. In Seat 2A, prominent tech investor Catherine Walsh was making increasingly loud sighs and checking her smartwatch dramatically every few minutes. "This is exactly why children shouldn't be allowed in first class," Walsh muttered to her assistant, loud enough for Marcus to hear clearly. "Some people have no consideration for others." In Seat 3B, entertainment attorney Benjamin Cross was typing aggressively on his laptop, clearly composing a complaint email about the flight experience. "If you can't control your child, you shouldn't inflict them on captive passengers," Cross said pointedly to his colleague. Marcus felt his face burning with embarrassment and anger. These were people from his own world, wealthy, influential individuals who should understand that sometimes circumstances beyond your control create impossible situations. But their judgment felt particularly brutal because Marcus was struggling with something he had always assumed came naturally to parents. He was a brilliant scientist who had revolutionized cancer treatment protocols and led breakthrough genetic research. Yet he couldn't figure out how to comfort his own 7-month-old son. The most painful part was watching Tyler's distress and feeling completely helpless to fix it. Every wail seemed to be expressing not just physical discomfort, but a deeper need that Marcus didn't understand how to meet. As the flight progressed, Marcus began to panic about more than just the immediate situation. He had 4 days of critical meetings in Boston, including the FDA hearing that had taken years to arrange. He couldn't bring a screaming baby into conference rooms filled with government regulators and medical board members. His entire company's future could collapse if he couldn't figure out how to care for Tyler properly. What Marcus didn't know was that 5 rows behind him in economy class, 17-year-old Isabella Rodriguez had been listening to Tyler's cries with growing concern and recognition. Isabella was traveling to Boston alone, carrying a backpack containing her few possessions and a plane ticket purchased with money her community had raised through tamale sales, car washes, and GoFundMe campaigns. The National Chemistry Olympics was her one chance to earn a full scholarship to Stanford, an opportunity that could change not just her life, but her entire family's trajectory. Isabella came from East Los Angeles, where she lived with her mother, grandmother, and 4 younger siblings in a 3-bedroom apartment. Her mother, Carmen, worked double shifts as a hospital cafeteria worker to support the family, while her grandmother, Esperanza, cared for the children during the day. 3 years earlier, Isabella's twin brothers, Diego and Daniel, had been born premature with severe colic that kept them crying for hours every day and night. The family couldn't afford specialists or expensive treatments, so Isabella had spent months researching infant distress, learning about digestive issues, and experimenting with different approaches to soothe her brothers. Through trial and error, patience and determination, Isabella had eventually figured out a combination of gentle massage techniques, specific holding positions, and calming methods that could stop her brothers crying within minutes. "Bella's got healing hands," her grandmother would say with pride. "That girl can calm any baby any time." As Isabella listened to Tyler's screams echoing through the airplane cabin, she recognized the same type of distressed crying that Diego and Daniel had exhibited. She could hear the specific pitch and rhythm that indicated the baby was experiencing digestive discomfort combined with overstimulation and exhaustion. She knew she could help. But she also knew that a Latina teenager from East LA approaching a wealthy Asian businessman in first class was likely to be viewed with suspicion, hostility, or outright rejection. Isabella had experienced enough discrimination and prejudice in her 17 years to understand that many people would see her as a threat or an inappropriate intrusion, regardless of her intentions or abilities. For 3 hours, Isabella wrestled with the decision. She pulled out her chemistry textbooks and tried to focus on preparing for the competition that represented her entire future. But Tyler's increasingly desperate cries made concentration impossible. Finally, Isabella's compassion overcame her fear of rejection. She closed her textbook and stood up, ignoring the curious stares of nearby passengers who wondered why a teenager was walking toward first class. The flight attendant at the divider between economy and first class looked at Isabella with polite suspicion. "Can I help you with something?" she asked, clearly prepared to redirect her back to her seat. "The baby in first class," Isabella said quietly but firmly. "I think I might be able to help." The flight attendant looked skeptical. "Are you traveling with family in first class?" "No, ma'am," Isabella replied respectfully, "but I have extensive experience with colicky babies. I recognize the type of crying. There are specific techniques that might help." The flight attendant glanced toward first class, where Tyler's screams were reaching new levels of intensity, then back at Isabella's earnest face. "Let me ask the father," she said diplomatically. But before she could move, Marcus Chin appeared in the aisle, holding the screaming Tyler and looking completely overwhelmed, his expensive shirt wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his usual executive composure completely shattered by hours of his son's distress. "I heard someone say they might be able to help," Marcus asked desperately, his voice hoarse from stress and exhaustion. Isabella took a deep breath, knowing that this moment would determine whether she would be accepted as a helper or dismissed as an inappropriate intruder. "Sir, my name is Isabella Rodriguez. I know I'm young, but I have twin brothers who had severe colic, and I spent years learning techniques that helped them. I think your son might be experiencing similar discomfort, and I might be able to help." Marcus looked at Isabella, really looked at her for the first time. He saw intelligence in her dark eyes, confidence in her posture despite her worn clothing, and most importantly, genuine concern for Tyler's well-being. Marcus was exhausted enough and desperate enough to consider help from any source, regardless of how unconventional. "What kind of techniques?" Marcus asked, raising his voice to be heard over Tyler's crying. Gentle pressure on specific digestive points, combined with the particular holding position that can relieve gas and intestinal pressure, Isabella explained professionally, using medical terminology that surprised Marcus. Also, babies experiencing colic often get worse with too much movement and stimulation. They need calm, steady pressure and rhythmic soothing instead. Marcus looked around the first-class cabin and realized that every passenger was watching this interaction with intense interest. Some looked skeptical about accepting help from a teenager from economy class. Others appeared desperately hopeful that someone might finally bring peace to the flight. Catherine Walsh, the tech investor who had been complaining loudly, leaned forward. For God's sake, let her try. Anything is better than this. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Please, he said, extending Tyler toward Isabella with trembling arms. If you think you can help him, I'm willing to try anything. What happened next seemed to defy logic and medical understanding. The moment Isabella's experienced hands made contact with Tyler, his crying began to diminish. Isabella held him in a specific position that Marcus had never seen before, supporting his head and neck with one hand while applying gentle, rhythmic pressure along his spine and lower abdomen with the other. Babies with colic often have trapped gas and immature digestive systems. Isabella explained quietly as she worked, her voice calm and professional. This position helps release the pressure while the massage stimulates peristalsis, the natural wave-like muscle contractions that move food through the intestines. Tyler's screaming reduced to whimpering, then to soft hiccups, then to complete silence. The entire first-class cabin watched in stunned amazement as Isabella began humming a soft, melodic tune that seemed to hypnotize the baby. Tyler's eyes, which had been squeezed shut in distress, slowly opened and focused on Isabella's face with apparent fascination. "Where did you learn that song?" Marcus asked, mesmerized by the transformation in his son. "My grandmother taught it to me," Isabella replied, continuing the gentle abdominal massage. "She said it was a lullaby her mother sang in Mexico. Something about the rhythm matching a baby's natural heartbeat, creating a calming effect." Marcus watched as Tyler began to relax completely in Isabella's arms. His tiny fists, which had been clenched in distress, slowly uncurled. His breathing became deep and regular. A tiny smile appeared on his face, something Marcus hadn't seen in hours. The businessman in C2A, who had been making hostile comments about disruption, now watched Isabella with obvious admiration. "Extraordinary," he murmured to his wife. "Absolutely extraordinary." Catherine Walsh put down her phone and stared at Isabella with a mixture of surprise and respect. "I've never seen anything like that in my life," she said to her assistant. The flight attendants gathered nearby, amazed by the sudden transformation in the cabin's atmosphere from tense hostility to peaceful wonder. "How long will he stay calm?" Marcus asked Isabella, almost afraid to hope. "If he's experiencing what I think he is, digestive discomfort combined with overstimulation, he should sleep peacefully for the rest of the flight," Isabella replied confidently. "The pressure has been relieved, and his nervous system is no longer in distress mode." True to Isabella's prediction, Tyler's eyes began to flutter closed as he settled into peaceful sleep, his small body completely relaxed for the first time in hours. As Isabella gently transferred the sleeping Tyler back to Marcus's arms, maintaining the same supportive position to avoid waking him, Marcus found himself studying this remarkable teenager with entirely new eyes. "Isabella, you said you're traveling to Boston for a chemistry competition?" Marcus asked quietly, not wanting to disturb Tyler's sleep. "Yes, sir. The National Chemistry Olympics. It's a competition for high school students across the country, and the top 3 finishers receive full scholarships to universities like Stanford, MIT, or Caltech." Marcus was impressed despite his exhaustion. "That's incredibly competitive. You must be exceptionally gifted in chemistry." Isabella shrugged modestly, a gesture that reminded Marcus of his own tendency to downplay his achievements. "I love understanding how things work at the molecular level, whether it's chemical reactions or figuring out what's causing a baby to cry. To me, they're both puzzles that need the right approach and careful observation." "Tell me about your background," Marcus said, settling carefully into his seat with Tyler sleeping peacefully in his arms. "How did a 17-year-old from East LA become qualified for a national chemistry competition?" Isabella's eyes lit up as she shared her story, though she remained standing in the aisle, unsure if she was welcome to sit in the empty first-class seat beside Marcus. "I've always been fascinated by science, but my high school in East LA doesn't have a strong chemistry program or laboratory facilities. Most of my learning has been self-directed using library books, YouTube videos, and online courses. Marcus gestured for Isabella to sit down, genuinely interested in hearing more and grateful for the company after hours of isolation with a screaming baby. My chemistry teacher, Mr. Patterson, noticed my ability in sophomore year and started letting me use the school's limited lab equipment after hours. When I completed the entire AP chemistry curriculum in 4 months and scored a perfect 5 on the exam, he helped me find online college courses. How did you qualify for the National Olympics? Marcus asked, genuinely curious about her journey. I won the Los Angeles Regional Competition, then the California State Championship, then the Western Regional Finals, Isabella explained matter-of-factly. Each level gets more complex, testing not just memorization, but creative problem-solving and the ability to design original experiments. Marcus was beginning to understand that he wasn't just talking to any talented teenager. He was speaking with a scientific prodigy whose intellectual gifts were as remarkable as her ability to calm crying babies. How's your trip to Boston being funded? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Isabella's expression became more serious, revealing the weight of expectation she carried. My community raised money through fundraisers. The taco truck owner on my block, our parish church, neighbors who work multiple jobs just to pay rent. They all contributed because they believe I can represent our neighborhood and show that intelligence isn't determined by zip code or family income. Marcus felt a profound shift in his understanding of the young woman sitting beside him. Isabella wasn't just naturally gifted. She was carrying the hopes and dreams of an entire community that had invested in her success, despite their own financial struggles. What happens if you win a competition? Marcus asked softly. Full scholarship to Stanford with additional funding for research projects and living expenses, Isabella replied, her voice filled with quiet determination mixed with barely concealed anxiety. It would mean I could study biochemistry at the highest level and eventually return to my community to create STEM programs for other kids like me who have the ability but not the resources. Marcus realized he was witnessing something extraordinary, not just scientific genius, but the kind of character, vision, and sense of purpose that could genuinely change the world if given the right opportunities. But he also recognized that Isabella was carrying enormous pressure. One competition would determine whether she could pursue her dreams or return to East LA knowing that her community's investment in her hadn't produced the hoped-for return. As Tyler continued sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling with deep, regular breaths, Marcus found himself making a decision that surprised even him. Isabella, I have a proposition for you, Marcus said, his analytical mind already formulating a plan. Isabella looked curious, but cautious, her street-smart instincts making her wary of offers that seemed too good to be true. What kind of proposition, sir? I'm in Boston for 4 days of critical meetings, including an FDA hearing that could determine my company's future. And as you've witnessed, I'm completely unprepared to care for Tyler while conducting business at that level. Marcus paused, watching Isabella's reaction carefully. I'd like to hire you as Tyler's caregiver during my Boston trip. I'll pay you $600 per day, provide you with a hotel suite adjoining mine, cover all your meals and transportation, and ensure you have complete freedom to prepare for and compete in your chemistry competition. Isabella stared at Marcus in shock, her mind rapidly calculating the implications. $600 per day, sir? That's more money than my mother makes in 2 weeks. It's what a professional nanny with specialized skills would cost in Boston, Marcus replied honestly. And frankly, you've already proven you're more capable with Tyler than any professional I could hire. Isabella's mind raced as she considered the offer. The money would be transformative for her family, enough to cover several months of rent or help her mother reduce her exhausting double-shift schedule. But she was also concerned about maintaining her focus on the competition that represented her entire future. Mr. Chun, I'm honored by your offer, but I need to be completely prepared for this chemistry competition. My entire future and my community's investment in me depends on my performance." Marcus smiled, recognizing the maturity and clear priorities that Isabella was demonstrating. "I understand completely, and I respect you even more for saying so. The competition comes first, absolutely. I would only need your help with Tyler during my business meetings and in the evenings after your preparation time. You would have complete freedom to study during the day, and I'd make sure you have quiet space and any resources you need." Marcus leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "Isabella, in the past 4 hours, you've shown me something I rarely encounter in my work, someone who can solve problems that others can't, who remains calm under extreme pressure, and who acts with genuine compassion rather than self-interest." "What do you mean?" Isabella asked, unsure where he was going with this. "You could have stayed in your economy seat and ignored a crying baby that wasn't your responsibility. You could have assumed that a wealthy businessman wouldn't welcome help from a teenager from East LA. Instead, you risked rejection and embarrassment to help a stranger in distress. That kind of character is rarer than scientific genius." Isabella felt overwhelmed by the unexpected turn her trip to Boston was taking. What had started as a scholarship competition was becoming something much larger and more complex. "Can I have some time to think about it?" Isabella asked, needing space to process this life-changing offer. "Of course," Marcus replied, "but I should mention one more thing." "What's that?" Marcus's expression became even more serious. "My company, Biogenesis Labs, has a foundation that provides scholarships and research opportunities to exceptionally gifted students from underserved communities. Regardless of how you perform in the chemistry competition, I'd like to discuss how we might support your educational and career goals." Isabella felt her heart racing as she realized that this chance encounter on an airplane might be opening doors she had never imagined possible. But she also felt uncertainty and caution. Was Marcus's offer genuine help, or was there something more complicated beneath the surface? How would accepting support from a billionaire affect her sense of self-reliance and the promise she'd made to her community? Would she be seen as someone who earned her success, or someone who got lucky with the wealthy benefactor? As the airplane began its descent toward Boston's Logan Airport, Isabella realized that the chemistry competition she had traveled so far to enter might not be the most important test she would face during her time in Massachusetts. The real test would be navigating the complex world of wealth, privilege, and opportunity that Marcus Chun represented, while staying true to the values and community that had shaped her into the remarkable young woman she had become. But as Isabella looked at baby Tyler sleeping peacefully in his father's arms, calm for the first time in hours, she knew that this moment had already changed her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. The crying had stopped, but the journey was just beginning. As the plane touched down at Boston's Logan Airport, Isabella made a decision that would alter the trajectory of her entire future. "Mr. Chun," Isabella said quietly as passengers began gathering their belongings, "I accept your offer. I'll help care for Tyler during your business meetings." Marcus felt relief wash over him as he realized he wouldn't have to navigate crucial FDA hearings while managing a baby alone. But more than that, he was genuinely excited about the opportunity to learn more about this remarkable young woman and potentially open doors for her future. "Excellent," Marcus replied, carefully adjusting Tyler in his arms as the baby continued sleeping peacefully. "I have a car waiting to take us to the hotel. We can discuss the details during the drive." As they walked through the airport together, a billionaire CEO, a sleeping baby, and a teenager from East LA, Isabella couldn't help but notice the curious stares they attracted. She was used to being invisible in most settings, but walking alongside Marcus Chin made her suddenly visible in ways that felt both exciting and uncomfortable. The car waiting outside was unlike anything Isabella had ever seen, a sleek black executive SUV with a uniformed driver and an interior that looked more like a mobile office than a vehicle. "The National Chemistry Olympics begins tomorrow with registration and the opening ceremony," Isabella said as they settled into the luxurious seats. The actual competition takes place over 4 days, with different rounds testing various aspects of chemistry knowledge and experimental design. Marcus listened intently as Isabella explained the competition format, impressed by her thorough preparation and strategic thinking about each round. "What are your strongest areas?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "Organic chemistry and biochemical pathways," Isabella replied confidently. "I also excel at experimental design under time pressure, which is crucial for the practical lab rounds." As they drove through Boston's busy streets, Marcus found himself studying Isabella with growing respect and recognition. This wasn't just a scientifically gifted teenager. This was a young woman with exceptional analytical skills, emotional intelligence, and the kind of determination that Marcus recognized from his own journey building biogenesis labs from a startup to a billion-dollar pharmaceutical company. When they arrived at the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown Boston, Isabella felt like she had stepped into a different universe. The hotel lobby was more elegant than any building Isabella had ever entered, with marble floors, contemporary art installations, and an atmosphere of quiet luxury. "Mr. Chun, welcome back," the hotel manager said warmly, approaching them with professional enthusiasm. "Your usual suite is ready, and we've prepared the adjoining room as requested." As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Isabella tried to process the surreal reality of her situation. Less than 24 hours ago, she had been sitting in economy class, worried about affording meals during her Boston stay and stressing about the competition. Now she was staying in a luxury hotel as the guest of one of America's most successful biotech entrepreneurs. Marcus's suite was larger than Isabella's family's entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of Boston Harbor, a full kitchen, a dining area that could seat 8, and multiple bedrooms decorated with understated elegance. "Your suite is through that door," Marcus said, gesturing toward an adjoining room. "You'll have complete privacy, your own bathroom, a workspace for studying, and 24-hour room service for meals." Isabella opened the door to her room and felt overwhelmed by its elegance and size. The bed looked like it belonged in a luxury magazine. The bathroom had a soaking tub and designer toiletries. The desk by the window was perfectly positioned for studying with natural light. "Mr. Chen, this is incredible, but I have to ask, why are you being so generous to someone you just met?" Isabella asked, her natural skepticism and self-protective instincts surfacing. Marcus was preparing a bottle for Tyler, who was beginning to stir from his long nap, showing signs of hunger. "Isabella, in my career building biogenesis labs, I've learned to recognize exceptional people quickly. What you did on that airplane wasn't just about baby care. It demonstrated problem-solving skills, courage, and the kind of compassionate intelligence that can't be taught." Marcus paused, testing the temperature of Tyler's bottle on his wrist the way Isabella had shown him. "But more than that, you remind me of myself at your age. I also came from a background where opportunities were scarce, and I had to work harder than others just to prove my worth." Isabella felt surprised by this revelation. "You didn't grow up wealthy?" Marcus smiled as Tyler accepted his bottle eagerly, finally eating after hours of distress. "My parents were immigrants from Taiwan. My father worked in a restaurant kitchen, and my mother cleaned houses to support our family. I earned a scholarship to UC Berkeley to study biochemistry, and I built my company from nothing, starting in a rented lab space with maxed-out credit cards and absolute determination." This information completely changed Isabella's perception of Marcus. She had assumed that all billionaires were born into privilege, but here was proof that exceptional success could come from humble beginnings. "The difference," Marcus continued, "is that I had mentors along the way who believed in my potential and opened doors I couldn't have opened myself. I want to be that kind of mentor for you, Isabella." The next morning, Isabella woke up in the luxury hotel room, feeling both excited and nervous about the competition that would determine her future. Marcus had already arranged for breakfast to be delivered to both their suites, along with a detailed schedule showing his business meetings and Tyler's care needs. "I have meetings from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. today," Marcus explained as they shared breakfast, while Tyler played with colorful chemistry-themed toys that Marcus had somehow acquired overnight. Tyler typically naps from 12:30 to 2 o'clock, so you'll have 90 minutes of complete freedom to focus on your competition preparation. Isabella appreciated Marcus's thoughtfulness and understanding of her priorities, but she was also discovering that caring for Tyler felt natural and enjoyable rather than burdensome. The opening ceremony for the National Chemistry Olympics was held at MIT's stunning Kresge Auditorium, a building whose architectural design itself reflected scientific principles. Isabella walked into the auditorium and felt her heart racing as she saw hundreds of teenage scientific prodigies from across the United States, each representing the pinnacle of chemistry achievement in their region. "Welcome to the 53rd Annual National Chemistry Olympics," announced Dr. Sarah Martinez, the competition director. "You represent the future of scientific research and innovation. Over the next 4 days, you'll face challenges designed to test not just your knowledge of chemistry, but your creativity, analytical thinking, and ability to solve problems that have no obvious solutions." Isabella looked around the auditorium and felt both intimidated and energized. Some competitors wore expensive lab coats with their school names embroidered on them, clearly representing well-funded private schools with state-of-the-art facilities. Others, like Isabella, wore simple clothes and carried basic supplies, representing communities that had sacrificed to send them here. But Isabella had learned something important during her airplane encounter with Marcus. Success wasn't determined by background or resources. It was determined by the ability to solve problems that others couldn't solve. The first day of competition consisted of individual written examinations, testing comprehensive chemistry knowledge, from basic concepts to advanced theoretical applications. Isabella opened her test booklet and felt her confidence surge as she read the first section. The questions involved organic chemistry reaction mechanisms, one of her strongest areas, and she could immediately see multiple solution pathways. For the next 5 hours, Isabella lost herself completely in the world of chemistry problem-solving. Each question presented a unique challenge that required her to combine different concepts in creative ways, predicting the products of complex multi-step organic syntheses, calculating thermodynamic equilibria for industrial chemical processes, designing analytical methods for detecting trace environmental contaminants, proposing mechanisms for novel catalytic reactions, analyzing spectroscopic data to determine unknown molecular structures. Isabella worked steadily and methodically, using techniques her grandmother had taught her about staying calm under pressure, combined with the analytical skills she had developed through years of self-directed study and limited lab resources. When time was called, Isabella felt cautiously optimistic about her performance, but she knew that the competition would only get more difficult over the next 3 days. After the first day's examination, Isabella returned to the hotel to find Marcus concluding a video conference with FDA officials, a meeting that appeared to have gone well based on his relieved expression. "How did it go?" Marcus asked immediately, his genuine concern evident despite his own stressful day. "I think I did well on the written exam," Isabella replied, "but there are some incredibly talented competitors here. The level of preparation and knowledge is higher than anything I've encountered before." Marcus could hear the slight uncertainty in Isabella's voice and recognize the self-doubt that often affects high achievers when they encounter new levels of competition. "Isabella, can I tell you something I learned during my first major scientific presentation at a pharmaceutical conference?" Marcus asked. Isabella nodded, curious about his perspective. "I was presenting to a room full of researchers who had decades more experience than I did, and I started to doubt whether I belonged there. But then I realized that they had invited me to that conference because I had something valuable to offer, a fresh perspective and innovative approach that they couldn't generate from within their established frameworks." Marcus adjusted Tyler in his arms as the baby reached for Isabella with obvious delight, clearly having formed an attachment to her. "You weren't selected for this competition randomly. You earned your place here through exceptional chemistry knowledge and problem-solving ability. Trust in the skills that got you here." Isabella felt her confidence returning as she absorbed Marcus's advice. She had spent so much time focusing on her competitors' advantages that she had forgotten her own unique strengths. Now, Marcus continued with a smile, I believe I hired someone to help me with Tyler this afternoon. I have a crucial meeting with potential research partners in 1 hour. For the next 4 hours, Isabella discovered that caring for Tyler was both relaxing and intellectually stimulating. She found herself explaining basic chemistry concepts to the baby using his toys, teaching him about molecular structures with building blocks, discussing color theory and light wavelengths as he played with rainbow rings, and creating simple demonstrations of density and buoyancy during bath time. Look, Tyler, Isabella said, arranging his blocks in patterns. If we have 2 carbon blocks, then 4 oxygen blocks, then 6 hydrogen blocks, what comes next in the pattern? Tyler giggled and clapped his hands, reaching for the blocks as if he understood the mathematical progression. Isabella realized that teaching fundamental concepts to a baby was actually helping her think about chemistry principles in more basic, essential ways, a form of preparation that would be valuable for the competition's more advanced rounds. The second day of competition involved team-based experimental challenges, where groups of 4 participants had to collaborate on complex laboratory investigations that required multiple perspectives and approaches. Isabella was assigned to a team with competitors from Massachusetts, Texas, and Oregon. Initially, she felt nervous about working with students who had clearly received more formal laboratory training than she had. But as they began working on their first challenge, designing an experiment to synthesize and purify a novel pharmaceutical compound, Isabella discovered that her unique background actually provided unexpected advantages. In East LA, I've worked with very limited lab equipment. Isabella contributed to the team discussion. I've learned to be creative with resources when you can't just order expensive reagents or use sophisticated instruments. You have to think more carefully about experimental design and alternative approaches. Kevin from Massachusetts, who had been working with assumptions about needing high-tech solutions, looked at Isabella with new respect. That's actually brilliant thinking. The judges are probably looking for elegance and efficiency, not just throwing expensive equipment at the problem. As the day progressed, Isabella found herself naturally taking on a leadership role within her team. Her ability to bridge theoretical chemistry knowledge with practical problem-solving impressed her teammates and helped them develop more comprehensive experimental protocols. Isabella, your approach to this synthesis pathway is incredible, said Maria from Texas. You're seeing shortcuts and alternative routes that the rest of us completely missed. By the end of the second day, Isabella's team had scored in the top 5 for their collaborative work, and Isabella had earned recognition from competition judges for her innovative experimental design. That evening, as Isabella recounted her competition experiences while helping Tyler with his dinner, Marcus found himself reconsidering his initial assessment of the young woman's potential. Marcus had originally seen Isabella as a scientifically gifted teenager who deserved educational support, but watching her analytical approach to childcare, her leadership capabilities, and her ability to bridge different worlds of experience, Marcus began to see something much more significant. Isabella, I want to discuss something important with you, Marcus said after Tyler had been put to bed for the night. What's that, Mr. Chun? Regardless of how you perform in the final competition rounds, I want to offer you a summer research position at Biogenesis Labs after you graduate high school. Isabella looked surprised and overwhelmed. What kind of research position? I'm thinking about creating a new program focused on developing affordable pharmaceutical solutions for underserved communities, Marcus explained, his entrepreneurial enthusiasm evident. Your chemistry knowledge is exceptional, but what makes you truly unique is your understanding of both the theoretical science and the practical challenges faced by communities that lack resources. Marcus leaned forward, his expression becoming more animated. You have something that most brilliant chemists lack. You understand both the molecular biology of disease treatment and the real-world barriers that prevent treatments from reaching the people who need them most. That combination is incredibly rare and valuable. Isabella felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized that Marcus was offering her something much more significant than just financial support. He was offering validation that her background wasn't a limitation to overcome. It was actually an asset that made her perspective uniquely valuable. Mr. Chun, that sounds amazing, but I'm still just 17 years old. I have so much to learn before I could contribute to something that important. Which is why this would be a development position. Marcus interrupted gently. The summer program would give you hands-on research experience while you prepare for college. Then, the Biogenesis Foundation will cover all your educational expenses, undergraduate, graduate, doctoral studies, whatever level you want to pursue, in exchange for your commitment to eventually using your skills to benefit communities like the one you came from. Isabella realized that Marcus was offering her something much more comprehensive than a scholarship. He was offering a long-term partnership that could allow her to achieve her dreams while staying connected to her values and community. The third day of competition featured individual practical laboratory work, where each participant had to design and execute an original experiment addressing a real-world chemistry challenge. Isabella's assigned problem involved developing a low-cost water purification method suitable for communities without access to expensive filtration systems, a challenge that resonated deeply with her personal experience and values. As Isabella worked in the MIT laboratory facility, she drew upon every aspect of her background and training. She thought about the water quality issues in her East LA neighborhood, the financial constraints faced by families like hers, and the chemistry principles she had learned through years of resourceful study with limited equipment. Isabella's experimental design combined activated charcoal filtration, made from renewable agricultural waste, solar disinfection techniques, and a novel pH adjustment system using locally available materials. The elegance of her approach was that it required no electricity or expensive equipment, just materials that could be sourced in resource-limited environments. Ms. Rodriguez, said Dr. Jennifer Park, one of the competition judges observing her work, your experimental design demonstrates not only strong chemistry knowledge, but also a sophisticated understanding of practical implementation challenges. Can you explain your design philosophy? Ma'am, Isabella replied while carefully monitoring her purification system's performance. I approached this problem by thinking about the communities who would actually need the solution. They don't have access to expensive equipment or technical expertise, so any practical solution needs to be simple, affordable, and maintainable with local resources. Dr. Park smiled and made extensive notes on her evaluation form, clearly impressed by Isabella's comprehensive thinking. When Isabella presented her results that afternoon, demonstrating that her low-cost purification system could remove 99.7% of contaminants while costing less than $5 per family to implement, the judges and fellow competitors gave her a standing ovation. Your work demonstrates exactly what we're looking for in future scientists, Dr. Martinez announced. The ability to combine theoretical knowledge with practical innovation that addresses real human needs. That evening, Isabella returned to the hotel to find Marcus celebrating successful FDA approval for his company's leukemia treatment, a breakthrough that would bring life-saving therapy to thousands of patients. Isabella, they approved it. Marcus exclaimed as she entered the suite, his usual professional composure giving way to genuine joy. 3 years of clinical trials, regulatory reviews, everything, and it's finally going to reach patients who need it. As they celebrated with Tyler, who clapped his hands enthusiastically despite not understanding the significance, Isabella felt a profound connection to Marcus's work. His scientific achievement would save lives, just as she hoped her own future research might someday do. Mr. Chun, can I ask you something? Isabella said as the excitement settled into quieter satisfaction. Of course. When you started Biogenesis Labs, did you always know you wanted to focus on cancer treatment? Or did that come later? Marcus thought carefully about his answer, recognizing that Isabella was really asking about finding her own scientific path and purpose. When I started the company, I honestly just wanted to prove I could succeed in pharmaceutical research despite my background, Marcus admitted. But then my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and I watched her struggle to access treatments that were theoretically available, but practically out of reach for working-class families. Marcus's expression became more serious. That experience changed everything for me. I realized that scientific breakthroughs mean nothing if they don't reach the people who need them. That's why Biogenesis Labs focuses not just on developing new treatments, but on making them accessible and affordable. Isabella felt a deep resonance with Marcus's philosophy. That's exactly how I feel about chemistry. The science is fascinating, but what really drives me is the potential to solve problems that affect people's daily lives. The fourth and final day of the National Chemistry Olympics featured comprehensive presentations, where each participant had to demonstrate their overall chemistry knowledge, experimental skills, and ability to communicate complex concepts to diverse audiences. Isabella's presentation covered her water purification research, but also incorporated broader discussion of how chemistry could address environmental justice issues in underserved communities. For 30 minutes, Isabella presented ideas that would challenge graduate-level chemists, delivered with the confidence and clarity of someone who truly understood both the theoretical and practical implications of her work. "Ms. Rodriguez," asked Dr. Robertson, no relation to Marcus, a prominent researcher from Stanford, "your work demonstrates exceptional maturity in linking chemistry research to social impact. What inspired this approach?" "Dr. Chun," Isabella replied, "I grew up in a community where environmental contamination, poor water quality, and lack of healthcare access are daily realities. I approached chemistry research by thinking about how scientific knowledge could actually improve people's lives, not just advance academic understanding." The judges exchanged impressed looks, clearly recognizing that Isabella's background had provided her with insights and motivation that purely academic training couldn't replicate. When Isabella finished her presentation, she felt confident that she had performed at her absolute highest level, regardless of the competition outcome. That evening, at the competition's closing ceremony, Isabella sat with hundreds of other competitors as the final results were announced. The auditorium was packed with students, parents, teachers, and observers from across the scientific community. Isabella felt her heart pounding as the announcements began. In third place, representing Massachusetts, Michael Zhang. Applause filled the auditorium as Michael walked to the stage to receive his award. In second place, representing California, Isabella Rodriguez from East Los Angeles. For a moment, Isabella didn't process what she had heard. Second place, a full scholarship to Stanford. Everything she had worked toward, sacrificed for, dreamed about, it had become reality. But wait, second place? Not first. Isabella walked to the stage in a daze, accepting her award and scholarship certificate from Dr. Martinez, while the auditorium applauded. She was thrilled, grateful, overwhelmed, but also experiencing a complex mixture of emotions about not winning first place. And in first place, representing Oregon, David Park. As David accepted the championship trophy, Isabella found herself analyzing her own reaction to coming in second. She had achieved something extraordinary, a full scholarship to Stanford, validation of her scientific abilities, proof that her community's investment in her had been worthwhile. So, why did she feel a strange sense of disappointment mixed with her gratitude and joy? Later that evening, back at the hotel, Isabella confessed these complicated feelings to Marcus while they shared a quiet dinner with Tyler. "Mr. Chun, I know I should be completely thrilled about second place and the Stanford scholarship," Isabella said, her voice uncertain. "And I am grateful, truly. But part of me can't help feeling like I failed somehow by not winning first place." Marcus smiled with understanding and recognition. "Isabella, can I tell you about my first major pharmaceutical patent application?" Isabella nodded, curious where this was going. "I was competing against research teams from major universities with massive funding and resources. My application came in second place for FDA fast-track approval." "Second place." Marcus paused, his expression thoughtful. "At the time, I felt devastated. I had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and I hadn't quite reached the top. But you know what I learned?" "What?" "Second place meant that my research was exceptional enough to compete at the highest levels. It meant that my unconventional approach and unique perspective were valued. and it opened doors to mentorship, funding, and opportunities that ultimately led to even greater success than first place would have provided. Marcus looked at Isabella with genuine warmth and respect. You didn't fail by coming in second. You succeeded by proving that a self-taught student from East LA can compete with, and nearly defeat, the best prepared students from the most elite schools in America. Isabella felt tears welling up as Marcus's words helped her reframe her understanding of the achievement. Besides, Marcus added with a smile, I have it on good authority that Stanford's chemistry program is exceptional, and that a certain biotech company would be very interested in hosting you for summer research before you start your undergraduate studies. As they prepared for their flight back to their respective homes the next day, both Isabella and Marcus knew that their lives had been permanently changed by their chance encounter. Isabella had won more than second place in a chemistry competition. She had discovered a mentor, a future career path, and proof that her dreams could become reality through determination, intelligence, and the courage to help someone in need. Marcus had found more than a capable caregiver for Tyler. He had discovered a brilliant young scientist who could help him build a legacy of using business success to solve important social problems while making treatments accessible to communities that needed them most. But most importantly, both of them had learned that sometimes the most life-changing opportunities come from the simple decision to help someone in need, even when there's nothing obvious to be gained and everything to potentially lose. As their plane lifted off from Boston, heading back across the country, Isabella looked out the window at the city that had transformed her life and smiled. The poor Latina girl from East LA, who had done the unthinkable by calming a billionaire's crying baby, had discovered that the most unthinkable thing of all was how far a single act of compassion could carry her. The crying had stopped. The competition was won, and the future stretched ahead, filled with possibilities that Isabella had never dared to imagine, but that she now had the confidence, support, and opportunity to pursue. She would never forget that it all began with a simple decision to walk up to first class and offer help when help was desperately needed. Sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the quietest words, "May I?" What if the person sitting next to you in economy class has the solution to your impossible problem? What if the teenager you'd normally ignore has abilities that could change your life? What if compassion, not credentials, is the real measure of human worth? This story proves that life-changing opportunities often come disguised as moments when we choose to help despite having nothing obvious to gain. Whether you're facing your own impossible challenge or witnessing someone else's courage, remember Isabella's words. To me, they're both puzzles that need the right approach and careful observation. Choose compassion. Choose to see potential in unexpected places. Choose to offer help even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. Because somewhere on your next flight, in your next meeting, in your next ordinary moment, the person you'd normally overlook might be exactly who you need. The crying has stopped, but the story of what happens when we choose compassion over judgment, that story is just beginning.